All right, guys. Try to do this one quick. This is just sort of to end this out here a little bit, but talking about what's going to shift our long-run aggregate supply. All right. The short of that is investment. Investment will change your long-run aggregate supply. So what long-run aggregate supply is telling us is that it's our production possibilities. Okay, based on the capital that we have, based on the resources that we have, this is what we can ultimately do. Our full employment, we can go maybe a little beyond that curve, the long run aggregate supply, but we're not going to be able to move very far past that because we have limited production possibilities. So in short, the thing that will shift your long run aggregate supply will be the same things that shift your production possibilities frontier. Okay, so the big thing to remember is that this kind of starts with aggregate demand. All right, so an aggregate demand shift doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to shift the long run aggregate supply. It only shifts if the thing that is shifting it is investment spending. All right, so if we get an increase in investment spending towards capital stock, things like technology, better capital goods. I always use the additional oven in the pizza place. Yes, I have to bring the pizza place back into it. But those are going to be the things that do it. So if investment increases, what happens to the short run and the long run? Well, we know that aggregate demand would increase. All right. I'm going to get it here. Aggregate demand will increase. Okay. And then typically what we thought, well, wages and that kind of stuff will go up. But in this case, what we're looking at is what is causing the increase. The increase is that we're building more capacity or a better capacity to produce more goods. Okay, so if that's the case, then actually your aggregate supply wouldn't decrease in this situation, it would increase. So capital stock, machinery and tools purchased by businesses to increase output. In this case, our output will increase. So our aggregate supply will increase, which will shift our long run aggregate supply. And notice it's the same thing that shifts your PPC. Okay, so that would be our new point there. Our quantity increased and our price level increased. So you got to remember that the only thing that shifts it though is investment spending. Okay, so if it was government or consumption or even trade, none of that is going to shift your long run aggregate supply. Okay, it will just go back to the long run if it's an increase in any of those things. So an increase in consumption or government or trade doesn't make you more productive. So spending doesn't cause economic growth. So the only thing that's going to cause economic growth is an increase in those capital goods. So only investment causes growth since the firms increase their capital stock. All right. All right. So this one should be pretty straightforward. We just talked about it. So take a second. All right. An advance in technology will cause E. So long run aggregate supply curve to shift to the right. Okay. Here's another one. An increase in which of the following would be most likely to increase long-run growth. Take a second. All right, so A and B are both going to be transfer payments. Pensions are just things that get paid out to people after they retire. And unemployment compensation, that's your automatic stabilizer. Okay, that's something that's put out to sort of help stabilize the economy in terms of fiscal policy. And then D and E are going to cause imports and exports, so trade. It's not necessarily going to impact how productive you are. So subsidies for capital goods would be the answer there. Okay. All right, take a few minutes to do this. I'll kind of talk through it, but for the most part, I'm just going to show you the rubric. So I'll draw out the curve, but why don't you guys go ahead and take a second. All right, so if you draw, what it's asking here is assume that the economy of Anderson Land is in long-run equilibrium with full employment. In short run, nominal wages are fixed. That means they're sticky. Okay, so if things change, wages will stay the same. All right, so draw a correctly labeled graph for short run aggregate supply. Okay, so let's just draw one quick here. It's going to say GDPR. Okay, and we are in long run equilibrium, so our aggregate demand, our aggregate supply, and then we are in equilibrium, so our long run aggregate supply is right here. Okay, and then looking at how show each of the following. So label equilibrium output labeled Y1. So down here we'd put Y1. And then for price level, PL1. So we go our doot, and then our PL1. There we go. All right, then it says assume that there is an increase in exports for Anderson Land. That'd be a demand shifter. On your graph in part A, show the effect of the higher exports on the equilibrium in the short run, labeling the new equilibrium output Y2 and PL2 respectively. So that would be an increase. All right, make sure you draw your arrows. So let's draw an increase in aggregate demand. Label it AD1. Got our arrows. All right. Now thinking for a second just of what we just talked about, would this shift long run aggregate supply? The answer is no. Okay, it's not going to shift long run aggregate supply. But our new points now, Y2 and PL2. Okay, so that's what they wanted there. So then C says, based on your answer in part B, what is the impact of higher exports on real wages? All right, and I'll show you what the answer that they have there, but I'll just kind of talk it through. Your real wages probably decrease because nominal wages are fixed, meaning that people are going to make the same amount of money even if the price level increases. And remember, real means adjusted for inflation, right? So if our price levels increase, inflation happens, right? So if we go up, that's inflation. So because inflation happened, our real wages will go down because our price levels increase, our wages stayed the same, our nominal wages up here stayed the same, so our real wages will decrease. So then D says, as a result of the increase in exports, exporting industries in Anderson Land increase expenditures of new container ships and equipment. Okay, to me, this sounds like capital investment, right? They increase their inventory, their capacity, equipment, containers, that kind of stuff, right? This to me, it says what component of aggregate demand will change? That sounds like investment to me, all right? So what is the impact on the long run aggregate supply? Well, an increase in long run aggregate supply would have to be an increase in investment or capital stock, and therefore that's what you have. So here are the answers. Okay, if you want to pause it and look at it and see if your answers compare. And I think that's it. All right, some videos there for you to watch. Enjoy. I'm still here trying to get this.